Alright, in this final video of Chapter 1, I'm going to go ahead and walk you through building out your Pro Tools session and importing your editorial assets. But before that, I'm going to take a quick moment and walk you through the folder structure that I like to use. You can download this template at a link in the video's description, or you can just build it yourself. The first thing I'm always going to do is make a copy of my template and drop it into the year that I'm working in, and then I'll go ahead and give it a name. So inside my root folder, the first folder I have is sessions, and inside this folder is going to be each one of my Pro Tools sessions. And my assets folder is anything I'm receiving from other departments, so this first folder reference is for any test files I'm using or reference mixes from other films. Next is the editorial folder, and this is where I'm going to put the turnover from editorial. I'm also going to go ahead and import my on-set sound, as well as the score I received from the composer. Finally, we have the deliverables folder, and this is where I'm going to put the actual final mix once I'm done with it to return to editorial. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and build our session. Now, I have included a session template here for you to take a look at, but I recommend you only use this as reference and instead build your own from scratch like I'm going to show you, because it's really important for you to understand fundamentally how all of this works. So let's go ahead and just create a blank Pro Tools session. I'm going to call it the name of the film. Make sure the sample rate is 48K, bit depth should be 32-bit float, and file type should be set to WAV. And go ahead and save this to your sessions folder. And I always like to version up as I work, so the first thing I'm always going to do is go up to File, hit Save As, and then add a version number to the end of my file. And then I'll increase this version number at different checkpoints along the way. Next, go ahead and go up to your main counter, hit this little arrow, and change this from bars and beats to timecode. Now, as you can see, our session starts at 1 hour, but remember, we had 30 seconds of pre-roll, so go ahead and hit Command 2 to open up your session settings. And under Session Start, change this to 00, 59, 30, 00, just like before. All right, first, we're going to go ahead and create some folders for each type of audio that we have. So hit Command-Shift-N to bring up the new tracks dialog and change the type to basic folder. You could do this with routing folders if you want to, but I prefer to keep my buses and my folders separate. Go ahead and set the number to 6 and hit Create. This first folder I'm going to name Utility, and it's going to have audio files that aren't meant to be ever heard in the final mix, so things like work tracks, R2 pop, etc. The next folder will be Dialogue, and I usually abbreviate this as DX. Next will be Foley, which I use FOL, Sound Effects, BG for backgrounds, and lastly MX for music. I also like to pick a consistent color scheme to stick with just so I can quickly identify which tracks are what. Next, I'm going to go ahead and create 5 more folders. This first one will be our source, and these are all of our source tracks that we're going to import from the AAF. Next will be group VCAs, then group buses, prints, and finally masters. And go ahead and color them whatever you wish. Now, before we go ahead and start creating tracks inside of these folders, I want to take a quick moment to walk you through the overall routing of the session. So for that, I have a little diagram here that I've created. You can also find this in the description, but it sort of just outlines our entire signal flow for the whole session. First, we have our source tracks themselves. These are where our audio clips live and where we actually do our editing. Next, we have a VCA, and you can kind of think of this as a remote control fader. So it's a single fader that will allow us to control all the faders of a particular group. Next, we have our effects channels. These are aux inputs that we can send specific channels to at certain times for things like reverb or FUTs effects, like a telephone effect, stuff like that. Next, all of that gets sent into a dedicated group bus where we can do group level processing like limiting or checking our loudness levels. After that, the signal gets sent to a dedicated print channel, and this is really useful if you want to export isolated deliverables, so like your dialogue by itself or your sound effects by itself. Then all of that gets sent to a main submaster bus where everything gets combined. This is where we will perform our final limiting as well as check the film's overall levels. Then that gets sent to a dedicated print channel where we can print out the entire mix, and then that gets passed on to our actual outputs. So this might be directly to your Dub Stages surround system, or maybe fold downs for smaller rooms or even headphones. This is a lot to take in, so don't worry if you don't understand the way all of this works. It will all make sense as we work through it. And if you're ever confused later on down the line about where you should route a particular track, feel free just to go back and reference this chart. Back in Pro Tools, the first thing we're going to want to do is go ahead and create all of those buses. So if you go to Setup and I/O, and then go to the Buses tab, and then hit New Path. We're going to start by creating 6 7-1 buses, and go ahead and give them names that match each of your groups. Next, we're going to go ahead and create our print tracks. I'm going to do 5 this time because we probably won't need to print our utility bus. Make sure these are 7-1 as well. I'm going to call these dialogue print, Foley print, etc. These are all 7.1, but if you're mixing in 5.1, you could do that instead. Next, we're going to create our 2 master buses. So again, 2 7-1 buses. The first one is going to be our submaster, and next is going to be our print master. Then we're going to go ahead and create a 7-1 output bus. We're also going to create a few fold down outputs, and this is useful for when we're working in a smaller room that's say only 5.1 or working on headphones. So I'm going to create a 5-1 bus and call it 5-1 fold for the fold down, and then another one for the output. And I'm going to create the same thing for our stereo fold down. So when you're all done, these are all the buses you should have. And to get sound out of Pro Tools and actually to your speakers, you're going to want to go ahead and map something to the output. Right now I'm at home with headphones, so I'm going to choose the 2.0 output. I'm going to map that to my audio interface. But if you were on a dub stage, you would map your 7.1 output to the output of the dub stage. Now that that's set up, we can go ahead and start creating our tracks. First, in my utility folder, I'm going to create 3 mono tracks and 1 stereo track. This first track is going to be my 2-pop, and this is so that we can have a 2-pop that goes to all of our groups. Next will be a track called Scenes, which I'll explain in a minute. And then I'm going to do a work mono and a work stereo. These work tracks are really helpful just to have to move around the session, because sometimes you want to do some audio editing, but you won't want to mess up anything on your actual tracks themselves. I'm going to go ahead and color all of these black. And then go ahead and select all these tracks and hit Option Shift on the output, and you're going to route them to the utility bus. For now, I'm going to skip over our main group folders because we're going to be creating those source tracks when we get to each of those phases. Next, we're going to create our group VCAs. So inside that folder, you're going to create 5 channels. And for the type, choose VCA master. And then go ahead and give each of these VCAs a name. I usually like to do the name of the group and then GRP for group, but you can honestly name them whatever you want, whatever makes sense to you. But these are going to be the faders that we use to remote control all the faders of each of our groups. Next, we're going to create some tracks inside of this group buses folder so we can actually control our buses for each group. So I'm going to create 5 tracks. They're going to be 7.1, and the type will be set to aux input. Go ahead and name these as well. And for these, you're going to want to set the input to the appropriate bus we created earlier. Then you want to route the output of each of these buses to the appropriate print track. If you use the same order when you created the buses, you can select them all and do Shift Option Command click to cascade assign stuff. So if we go down and select the first one, it will assign everything in a cascading way. So you can see here, it lined up the outputs for us automatically. Also in this folder, we need to create an aux track for our utility bus. So once again, do 7.1 aux input and call this utility. For the input, we're going to choose our utility bus. And for the output, we're going to choose our 7.1 output directly because we don't want this routed to any of our print tracks. Next, we want to go ahead and put those print buses on tracks so we can see them. So inside your prints folder, go ahead and create 5 more tracks. Same thing as before, 7.1 aux input, and call these dialog print and so on. Go ahead and select all of these and do Command Option Shift, click the input to cascade assign the input to the print buses we created. And then all of these will be going to the submaster bus. So go ahead and just do Shift Option, click the output to assign them all to our submaster bus. And finally, we need to go ahead and create our master channels. Go ahead and create 2 7.1 tracks, set the type to aux input as well. This first one is going to be our submaster. The next one is going to be our print master. Input of submaster will be submaster, and it will be sent to the print master. And the input of the print master will be the print master, and the output will be our 7.1 output. Then we want to go ahead and create 2 more aux inputs for each of our fold downs. So first we're going to do the 5.1 aux input for the 5.1 fold down, and then a stereo aux input. The inputs of these will be the 5.1 fold buses we created, and the outputs will be the appropriate outputs. Now right now these fold down channels aren't actually receiving our mix, so on your print master, under the send section, you're going to want to go ahead and create a send to each of those buses. You'll get this little dialog that pops up the first time you do this, and this is because you're sending a 7.1 track to a track with lower channel counts, so it's saying that it's going to be folded down to match that, which is exactly what we want. And then go ahead and turn up each send all the way to 0. And that's indicating that the 7.1 channel is being folded down to both of these 5.1 and 2.0 channels. If you want to adjust the settings of this fold down, you can do that by going to Pro Tools Settings, Mixing, and down here under Routing Coefficients, you can adjust how the fold down actually works. It's basically going to be copying your extra channels into the existing channels of the 5.1 and 2.0 fold. The default preset of modern works just fine here, but you could experiment with these settings if you want to. And those are all the tracks we need to create for right now. As a quick review, we have our utility folder, and this is where we're going to put stuff that is not meant to be used in the final mix, but just for our own reference. Then we have folders for each of our source tracks. Then we have our VCA faders, which are going to be assigned to each of our groups. Then we have a bus for each of our groups. which are then going to our print tracks and then onto our masters. Now I know that was a lot of routing and it can be a bit overwhelming when you're first getting started, but once you have it all set up, you really don't need to think about it that much afterwards. And again, if you're ever confused, feel free to go back and reference this chart. All right, now that our session is all set up, we're ready to go ahead and import our media. First, we're going to import our video, but before we do, we want to go ahead and copy it into our Pro Tools session folder. If you look in your session folder, there's a couple folders that Pro Tools automatically created, one of which is video files, so I'm going to go ahead and copy our .mxf file into that folder. I'm also going to go into audio files and create a new folder called editorial turnover. And then I'm going to copy the A01 and A02 MXF files, which are the audio tracks for a video, into that folder. It's important to copy your data into your session folder itself. That way, if you ever want to move the session folder to a different computer or give it to somebody else, all the appropriate files will come with the session. Once that's done, in Pro Tools, go up to File, Import, and Video. Go to your session's video files folder and import that clip. For the location, choose Spot, and make sure the start time code is 5930. Now, if you hit Command 9 to open up your video viewer, you should see your video working in Pro Tools. You can put this track anywhere you like. I like to put it at the very top of my session. I also recommend you select the clip and hit Command L to lock it in place so you don't accidentally move it. You should also go ahead and verify that the burnt-in timecode on the video matches your session's timecode. You can see here that they match, so we're in sync. Next, we're going to go ahead and import that editorial mixdown. So go up to File, Import Audio. Sometimes on Mac, you may get this options window that's covering up your entire dialog. So if this happens, just hit Hide Options and then navigate to your session folder, Audio Files, and find those two files we copied over. For destination, hit New Track, change the location to Spot, and make sure the start is set to 5930 as well. These came in as two mono files, but we want them in a single stereo file. So in our utility folder, I'm going to make a new stereo audio track, and I'm going to call it Editorial Mix. Then you can select both mono tracks and drag them down to the stereo channel, and they'll become a single stereo clip. Then we can delete these auto-generated mono tracks. For the output of this track, go ahead and set it to your utility bus. If you're not currently on the dub stage and you are working off monitors or a smaller room, you may not be able to hear what's going on, and so that's because we have our utility bus set to our 7.1 output. So we're going to want to change this to what we're working on right now. So right now I'm working on headphones, so I'm going to choose the 2.0 stereo output. It's going to say it's going to fold it down, that's fine, and now we can hear it. All right, next we want to go ahead and import our AAF. So we're going to put that into our source folder. So go up to File, Import, and Session Data. Go ahead and find the AAF file and hit Open. Right here in this dialog box, we get a list of all the tracks in the AAF. We don't need the video because we imported that separately, but we're going to keep all of the audio tracks. Under Session Data, I like to uncheck Import Clip Gain and Import Volume Automation because I don't want any clip gain or volume automation that the editor may have performed on the clips. The last thing we want to change is right here under Media Options where it says Link to Source Media. I want to change this to Copy from Source Media. This is going to copy all of the associated files into our session folder. Then hit OK. It might take a minute for Pro Tools to go through and find each of the files, but once that finishes, we'll have all of the clips on our timeline. Next, go ahead and select all of these tracks that were created, and Shift-Option-click the output to route them all to your utility bus. Now, by default, Pro Tools is going to import all of these audio files into the main audio files folder, but I actually want to organize it a bit better, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and save and close out my session. Then inside the audio files, I'm going to select all of these WAV files that it imported, and I'm going to move them into the editorial turnover that I created earlier. As you work, you're going to be getting more and more audio files in this folder, so I like using subfolders to keep things organized. When you reopen the session, you're going to get this missing files dialog. Go ahead and just hit automatically find and relink, hit OK, and Pro Tools will refine all the files. Now that our media is imported, we want to go ahead and ensure proper video and audio sync. So we've already confirmed that the timecode matches our clips, so we know our video is in sync with our timecode. Next, we want to confirm the editorial mix, so I'm going to solo this mix, and I'm going to navigate to where my 2-pop is. If you hit this little button on the top left here, you can increase your waveform size, and right here I see my 2-pop, and I can see it lands exactly on 5958, so I know that the mix down is in sync. Then I'm going to scroll down to my source clips, and I can see right here, here is the 2-pop from our AAF, and it is also at the right timecode, so I know that it's in sync as well. Next, I'm going to mute my editorial mix, and just listening to my imported source tracks, I'm going to spot check the whole film to make sure everything is still in sync.
Hello?
No, hey. Okay by yourself?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll be right back. Okay.
Cool. So I can tell that the whole film, everything is staying in sync, and that's a good sign. We also want to set up a system-wide 2-pop that we're going to send to each of our group buses. And so for that, on your 2-pop track, you could go ahead and just copy over an existing 2-pop that you imported and paste it there. But another way to do it is to select the 1-frame portion of the track. And if you hit Option Shift 3, it creates an empty clip. Then with that clip selected, you can go up to Audio Suite and Other and Signal Generator, and then set it to 1000 Hertz at -20 dB, hit Render, and it will create a 2-pop there just like that. Now, right now, this is only going to our utility bus, but we actually want to send this to every single one of our buses. So under sends, I'm going to find my dialog bus, send it there, and set the level send to 0. Next, we're going to option drag this send to the rest of the send channels. And we need 5 of these, so if you expand your track, you can see the E-send as well. Then collect the second one, and you're just going to change the output to the Foley bus. Then you can do the next one, change that to the sound effects bus, and so on. Now our 2-pop is being sent to all of these buses. So if we scroll down to those buses and hit play, we should see it on the meters. And we do. This is very important because we end up using our print tracks to export isolated deliverables. We want to make sure that they still have a 2-pop. Also, real quick, I want to point something out if you're using a 32-bit workflow. Right here, I have a line of dialogue that is clipping.
Are you good?
You can see right there, it's hitting 0 dB on my meters. And if I just turn down the clip gain of this, I can hear that it's no longer clipping.
Are you good?
It sounds normal, it doesn't sound clipped, but the waveform still appears clipped. You can see it's kind of cut off there. And that's because Pro Tools generates waveforms with a 0 dB reference point, and it doesn't recalculate the waveforms when you change clip gain. So this can be a bit confusing because it looks like the audio is still clipping even though it's 32-bit and we pulled it down. So if you want to recalculate the waveforms, what you can do is go up to Audio Suite, Other, and hit Normalize. That brings up this normalize effect. Make sure the mode is set to peak, and then with your clip selected, hit Render. And this will render out a duplicate file with the gain turned down to where the very absolute loudest part of the signal peaks at exactly 0 dB. So now we can see our waveforms have recalculated. So that's a good quick way to test to make sure the 32-bit turnover from your NLE actually worked. All right, now to complete our session setup, we want to set up scene markers and scene clips. These markers will be very important to us when we go to edit room tone or backgrounds, as well as doing scene level automation and mixing. So first, go ahead and on your counter navigate to the 1 hour mark because that is going to be scene 1. Then if you hit the enter key on your number pad, you will create a new memory location. Pro Tools call these memory locations. A lot of times we just call them markers. If you don't have a number pad, you can go up to setup and keyboard shortcuts and search for memory location, and you can change the shortcut here. In this new memory location dialog box, we're going to go ahead and name this 01 for scene 1. And you can give it a color if you want to. I'm going to go ahead and choose white and hit OK. Next, you're going to want to play through the film and find out when scene 1 ends and scene 2 begins. Now, one thing to note here is that it might be practical for you to create more scenes than you actually see in the script or that the editor would consider a scene. For instance, this short film only has 3 scenes according to the script, but from an audio perspective, sometimes a single scene will change quite substantially. For instance, this is a conversation, and then we cut to a montage dance sequence with music. So in my mind, this I'm considering to be a new scene, even though on the script it's still part of the same scene. So just keep that in mind as you are making these scene boundaries. If you wanted to match the numbers of the script, you could do scene 1A, scene 1B, and so on. But for me, I'm just going to pick new numbers in a way that makes sense for me. Anyways, once you've found where the next scene begins, go ahead and put your cursor as close to it as you can, and then you can use the period or comma keys to scrub forward and back by 1 frame. Just make sure up here your grid and your nudge are both set to 1 frame. Then move your playhead until you are right on the first frame of the new scene. Then go ahead and add a new memory marker for that scene. All right, so I've gone through and marked every single scene. Next, go ahead and find that scenes track we created earlier, put your cursor on the track, and then click the first scene marker and the second scene marker while holding down Shift, and you will select the portion of that scenes track between those 2 markers. Then if you hit Shift Option 3, you will create a new empty clip group. Now click the second marker and Shift select the third marker and do the same thing. And repeat this through the entire film. I'm also going to go ahead and add an end marker as well. These empty clips will be really useful later on when we want to quickly select an entire length of a scene, say to write some automation or trim some clips. I'm also going to select all these clips and hit Command L to lock them in place. All right, and with that, our workspace setup is complete. We've set up our project folder structure, our session, we've imported our media, we've established our scene boundaries, so now we're ready to jump into the next phase, which is dialogue editing.